Hello and welcome to the video. Today we have another short story titled The Witch of Westmount Part 2. I hope you enjoy. I think pigeon is the easiest to nab. Plus, you don't need to cook it for as long as other meats, Artair said. He was sitting in the passenger's seat of the wagon next to Taryn. Although he had become more at home with the mode of transport, he still felt a little nauseous from the gently bumping wagon ride. You see, I believe there is nothing wrong with pigeons myself, but there is so little meat on them, it's hardly enough for a meal. But a full-size rat, on the other hand, Taryn said, thoughtfully scratching his chin. Can we please talk about something else? All this talk about rodents is making me as queasy as Artair probably feels, Thalia said from the back of the vehicle. The wagon's canvas covering had been pulled back as the last few days on the road had been quite warm. I'm sorry, Your Royalness, but most of us aren't used to 3-course meals every day, Balanos said with a jovial tone. Actually, I can't speak for all of us. What do the people of the woodland realm eat, Miss Green? We are quite content living off mushrooms, wild berries and the like, for the most part. But we do bring down larger bucks and similar animals, mostly to control populations rather than as a food source, Nessa replied, a hint of longing in her voice. Artair had noticed a slight change in the druidess's attitude this trip, compared to the last. For the first time since they had formed their little group, it almost seemed as if she was enjoying the company of the other misfits. Yeah, well, there doesn't seem to be much food of any sort around these parts, Taryn said, gesturing to the farmland on either side of the road. The closer they got to Westmount, the more sedentary the vegetation, crop fields and livestock seemed to be. The livestock just stood in their fields, motionless. The cows weren't even chewing their cud. That was the first sign that things were odd. Even stranger were the plants, which appeared to be frozen still, despite the slight breeze that blew through the traveller's hair. Nothing looked dead, but it was eerie how still the landscape seemed. Taryn pulled the wagon to a stop near the beginning of the town proper, and he stood up on the coachman's seat to take a look. The town was located next to Tama Lake, a stretch of water large enough that Taryn couldn't see the bank on the other side. This town is located on one of the most popular trade routes between Arundel and the western provinces, he said, sitting back down. And? Nessa replied as Taryn gripped the reins. Then where are all the caravans and merchants? This town looks lifeless, Taryn said, looking around at the others. Perhaps not lifeless, he thought, but certainly not as busy as it should be. There were a few townsfolk wandering around, doing menial tasks, but no one was calling for goods to be sold, or talking at all for that matter. Taryn drove the wagon into the centre of town, where the lake could be seen more clearly. There were no fishing boats on the water. The men just seemed to stand around the small docks, as if waiting to be told to go fishing. You'd find more cheer in a graveyard, Balanos said, as they all disembarked. Brutus, the large dog, bounded around them and, as usual, walked over and stood next to Thalia. Excuse me, good man, do you happen to know when we might find an inn for the night? Taryn asked a passerby, but the older man simply looked up into his face, mumbled something incoherent, and then proceeded to keep sweeping the dirt road that bisected the town. Well, that was certainly odd, Taryn said as he looked back to the group. We'd better stay close to one another. Something is wrong with this town. You're telling me. I've gotten a warmer embrace from Arun guards chasing me, Artair said, standing next to Taryn. I'll find a place for the horses and wagon, and I'll have all Brutus here guard things till we get back. The enormous dog woofed as he left Thalia's side and ran over to lick Taryn's face. Wiping off dog slobber, he continued, You should try and find an inn. Or at least something resembling an inn, Taryn said, the last part under his breath. Balanos walked over to Artair and startled him with a friendly punch to the shoulder. Come on, let's all go and find an inn, shall we? The group found their way to the largest building in town, which seemed to serve as an inn, pub and farrier station all in one. I guess old Tan was right. For a small town to have such a large building dedicated to travellers, they must get a lot of them, Balanos said as they stepped onto the building's porch. Who is Tan? Thalia asked. Taran, Tan, same, Balanos said with a chuckle, which quickly died out as they entered the building. There were people inside, but like in the rest of the town, they were just standing around. Some were sweeping, some cleaning glasses and goblets, but all were in silence. Balanos squared his shoulders, walked over to the barman and said, My good man, we're after 2 rooms, if you please, and if there is anything going for lunch, I'm sure my friends would agree with me that we would be interested indeed. The man simply looked into Balanos's face, mumbled something, and looked back down at his mirror-polished tankard. All of the townsfolk looked content, if not bored, but very underfed. It was almost as if they were wasting away. Balanos could see quite clearly behind the barman into the kitchen, which seemed well stocked. Well, this should cover us regardless, he said, depositing a few silver on the bar top before turning back to the others. I think the benefactor, Renald, was right. I won't pretend to understand channeling, but this place has magic written all over it. No sensible barkeep, spellbound or otherwise, would ever miss the opportunity for coin, Balanos said. The door to the inn swung open and Taran appeared, brow furrowed. You should come and see this, Taran said. The others followed him back out onto the street, matching his brisk stride. Balanos sheltered his eyes from the glare and followed Taran's pointed finger. 3 young girls were playing around the large well that was at the centre of the town square. They were all wearing different coloured dresses, one yellow, one blue and one green. They stood out so much from the rest of the town that it was almost eerie. Let's go and see if these girls know anything about the townsfolk, or this witch of ours, Taran said. Balanos nodded and they approached the young girls apprehensively. The girls stopped playing and turned toward the group, eyeing them warily. Balanos bent down, getting closer to their level, and with as much of a friendly tone as he could muster, he said, Good morning, little girls. I like your pretty dresses. The girls huddled together, clearly uneasy. We were passing through town and we noticed, He paused, looking back to the others for support. We noticed all the grown-ups were acting a little strange, Nessa said, placing a hand on the old archer's shoulder. The girls looked at each other and nodded in unison. Are your mummy and daddy around? Balanos asked, forcing a smile. The girls shook their heads and prodded what looked like the eldest in the back, pushing her to the front of the group. You shouldn't call us little, and our mummy and daddy died in the war a long time ago, she said, looking at her feet. We are big enough to look after ourselves, the haughtiest of the 3 said, puffing up her chest. I'm sure you are, little ones. However, someone told us that there may be a Nessa paused mid-sentence to choose her words more carefully. There might be someone acting odder than the rest of the grown-ups? Someone who might be hurting them, or making them do things? Does any of this sound familiar? The 3 girls huddled together in quiet discussion before, once again, the eldest stepped forward, stamping her feet. Don't call us little girls, she said, pouting. If you're looking for someone odd, well, there is old lady Pratchett. She lives all alone at the edge of town, that way. The girl pointed toward the furthest visible point of the river that fed Lake Tama. She is a mean, nasty old lady who the townsfolk call... She paused and leaned in to whisper the last 2 words. A witch. With that, the girls turned back to each other and began to giggle. Well, that certainly sounds just like the lady we're interested in, Taran said, folding his arms across his chest. Balanos got to his feet, smiling at the girls. He and Ira had talked about having children many times, but unfortunately, the gods had deemed them unfit to be parents. Thank you very much, grown-up ladies. You can go back to your playing, and hopefully we will be able to get to the bottom of this and get your town back to normal, he said as they smiled up at him. We like the town this way. No grown-ups to tell us what to do, the last of the girls said, as the 3 resumed their dance around the town's well. The group huddled together, out of earshot of the young girls. Artair watched the dancing children carefully as he waited for someone to speak. "I think we should pay Miss Pratchett a little visit," Taran said with an air of confidence. "I agree, but we need to be careful. A rogue channeler could be very dangerous," Nessa said. Artair found it slightly unsettling that Nessa agreed with Taran so easily, but he put those feelings aside as Thalia began to speak. "I think we should send Artair in to do some reconnaissance. Then Nessa should see if she can speak to some of the local flora, while the rest of us lay some sort of trap." The entire group looked down at the young princess with a mixture of bewilderment and shock. Under their gaze, she seemed to shrink down, and she began to wring her hands together. Artair didn't think it was a bad idea at all, but Taran was the first to cut the silence. "That might be overkill, Princess. I'd say the best plan of attack is a surprise." "I agree. The longer we stay in this town, the longer the witch will have to notice us," Nessa said, again agreeing with Taran, which Artair still wasn't used to. "I was just thinking, what if she isn't our witch?" Thalia said quietly, but it seemed only Artair had heard her, as the others were already walking away. Taran had stashed the wagon behind what looked like an old jail. As the group approached, they heard Brutus's tail beating the side of the wagon. Artair grimaced as he looked in through the barred jail window to see 3 prisoners standing completely still in the corner of the cell, staring at the ground. "All right, I reckon if we can somehow cause a distraction and get her to come out of her house, then Balanos can take potshots with his bow, while Nessa, Artair and myself rush her," Taran said as he handed out the relevant equipment to each of them. Artair cleared his throat. "Won't she be expecting something like that? I don't really like the idea of needing to get close enough to a witch to use my knife," he said, pulling his blade from beneath his cloak. "Well, if we get in there quick enough, she shouldn't have time to respond," Nessa said, patting Artair on the shoulder. "And what about me? Am I just supposed to stay here with Brutus?" Thalia said, her fists on her hips. "Just stay out of harm's way," Nessa snapped. The 5 of them approached a cottage that lay on the outskirts of town, beside the wide river Tamar. It was right where the young girls had said it would be. The cottage was hemmed by a small stone wall, and a nicely kept garden lay between the house and a long, chest-high woodpile. Thalia had not said a word since they had set out, and was feeling quite dejected. The others hadn't even considered her plan. It was a good plan, Thalia said to herself as she followed the others over the small fence, then crouched with them behind the woodpile. Each of them peeped over the top of the pile to look in through an open window on the side of the house. They could see right into the main room of the small cottage, where dozens of little bone charms were pinned to the walls. In the centre of the room, hung from the ceiling, was a great cauldron. The small fire pit below the cauldron glowed hot as the contents steamed upward. A figure stepped in front of the cauldron. It was a hunched-over, aged lady. Her thickly matted, grey hair stuck out in all directions, and her cloak looked as if it was made from grass and moss. "It certainly looks like a witch's hut, at least from the descriptions in children's books I've read," Thalia said with a smirk on her face. The others looked at her, not sharing her amusement. "Oh, come on! A ridiculously large cauldron and an old hag. This can't be the dangerous witch we seek. She doesn't look powerful enough to get down her front steps, let alone curse an entire township." "Looks can be deceiving, girl," Nessa said. "I don't care what it might look like. We can't take any chances." "Shh," Balanos hissed. Clearly the archer's keen eyes had noticed something. Straining her eyes, Thalia attempted to see into the dark room, trying to catch a sight of the old hag again. She didn't need to wait long. The old lady came back into view, carrying what looked like a handful of bones. She dumped the dozen or so bones into the cauldron unceremoniously. "Those look like human bones," Balanos whispered. "Right then, this has to be our witch. Nessa, can you cause a large enough distraction to get her to come outside?" Taran asked, leaning his back against the woodpile. "Of course I can. You'd all better be ready when I do, though. I don't want to be caught out in the open," Nessa replied. "You got it, plant lady," Balanos agreed, already readying an arrow. "Wait, can't we just think about this for 1 second?" Thalia pleaded. "Come on, Thalia. You saw as clearly as the rest of us. She is obviously making some kind of potion or spell," Artes said, placing his hand on her arm. Thalia frowned. "I may not know much about channeling, but when I have used it, I certainly didn't need some ridiculous potion made of bones. And Nessa, I've seen you in action. Just a simple wave of your hands, right?" Thalia pushed Artes' hand away. "Look, we don't have time for this. Everyone, get into positions. Princess, stay here," Nessa snapped, as the others got to their feet and turned away from her. Fuming, Thalia stood up again to look back into the window. She had the nagging feeling that there was something wrong with what they were about to do. Throwing caution to the wind, Thalia made her way around to the opposite side of the woodpile and darted across the garden and behind the house. From her position, she could see the others preparing to attack from the front of the cottage. Thalia wished she had a way of knowing the truth. Her gut told her that any minute now they were all about to make a big mistake. But all she could do was stand there, wringing her hands together until her fingers were damp with sweat. In her desperation, she closed her eyes, straining her mind for an answer. A moment later, a strange feeling came over her as she began to sense something from inside the cottage. It was the old lady. She could feel her shambling around inside the house. Thalia couldn't see anything exactly, but she could sense a tiredness and a sort of aching feeling deep within her. Thalia took in a sharp breath as she realized these were the emotions of the old lady, a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. "Not long now, dear. I'll have some soup ready for you in just a minute. Old Gran will make everything better." Thalia froze. Even her hands ceased fidgeting. It was as though the old lady had spoken inside Thalia's head. Whatever was going on, this old lady certainly wasn't maliciously cursing the entire town. As she pondered her next move, an enormous crash came from the front of the cottage. Having only a split second to decide what to do, Thalia ran around to the front of the cottage and into the open space, which was now covered in splintered wood. Nessa's vines had ripped off most of the facade of the cottage. The splintered remains of the front door lay strewn about. "Wait!" Thalia shouted, running with her arms outstretched, as she saw the others' heads pop up from their concealed positions. "What in the depths? I bloody tell you what, old Gran ain't afraid of nothing!" shrieked the old lady, as she slowly made her way down the front steps of her now fully exposed home. She was wielding a bone that was as long as her entire arm. "She isn't our witch," Thalia exclaimed, puffing. "Witch? Witch? Oh, that's real nice, even coming from marauders. That's real nice," the old woman yelled. "If you aren't a witch, then what was with the bones, old woman?" Nessa said, having now walked back into the open. "Bones? Been spying on me, have you? Well, you stupid twit, the bones were for me bone broth soup. Cow bones are best, but no one from town's been by in quite some time, so I had to use a deer I caught in a trap a while back." The old woman lowered her weapon slightly as her tired old eyes searched out the rest of the group. "The soup was for poor old Misty." The old woman pointed the bone back toward the house as an equally aged grey dog limped out onto the porch. The dog's blind eyes seemed to be searching for the old woman. Thalia noticed that none of the others would meet her eyes as they looked among themselves. "Bone broth's the only thing that keeps her joints from pain in her old age. Something we both share." The old lady hobbled over to the dog and sat down, allowing the dog to rest its head on her lap. I do apologize, miss. We had certain misconceptions. I'm sorry," Taran said with the utmost sheepishness in his voice. "Look at my house, you twit. What am I supposed to do now?" The old lady sighed, patting the dog gently on the head. "Not to worry, Taran here. Actually, all of them are going to help rebuild your cottage, free of charge," Thalia said with a smile, as she walked over and joined the old lady in patting the dog. "We still have to solve our little problem first, but don't worry, we will be right back to fix your lovely cottage." That was awkward, Artair said, as the group slowly made their way back into town. I told you there was nothing suspicious about Miss Pratchett, Thalia said, coming to a stop. But there might be with that, she said, pointing at the 3 little girls standing in front of the well. Did you kill old Miss Pratchett? The eldest said. She was always mean to us, her and those silly protection charms, the haughty one said. I didn't like her dog either, the final one said. There is something wrong with those girls. I can feel it, Thalia said, turning to the others. Now that you mention it, I can feel something off as well, Nessa said, looking toward Thalia with a much softer expression than usual. Me too, Artair chimed in. If you didn't do what we wanted, then we're going to have to make you like the rest of the other silly grown-ups around here, the eldest little girl yelled as she stamped her foot. I think it's past your bedtimes, little girls, Taran said, pulling his sword out of its scabbard. Are we really going to fight 3 little girls? I don't think I can do this, Baldanos said, backing away. I told you not to call us little girls, the eldest said, but this time her voice sounded nothing like a child's. It was deeper and far older. As they watched, black smoke began to billow out from the bottoms of all 3 of the little girls' dresses. Now the rest of the group prepared themselves. Baldanos drew his bow, Artair grasped his dagger and pulled out his grappling hook, and Taran pulled his shield from his back. The black smoke engulfed the little girls and rose until it was higher than the heads of the travellers. Then the laughing started. 3 deep, chattering giggles grew louder and louder. That's enough. We know what you are. The misfits of Arundel are here to stop you, once and for all, Thalia said with much more confidence than she really felt. The second she finished her sentence, the smoke fell with incredible speed. It was there one moment, then gone in the blink of an eye. There stood 3 monstrous forms, their dark, bark-like skins stained at the front, one yellow, one blue, and one green. To be continued. That was The Witch of Westmount Part 2. It is the 5th part of the season, so if you have missed any of the others, consider going back and getting up to date. If you enjoyed this tale, please leave a like and comment any feedback you have, and consider subscribing as there will be more tales to come. This was a Tellotale. Thanks for watching.